A startling new student. The Galactic Academy for Strategic Studies hummed with nervous energy. Today, for the first time in its illustrious history, a human would be joining the ranks of its elite students. "I heard they call their planet Earth," whispered Zorax, a spindly arachnoid, to his neighbor. "What an odd name." "I heard they only have 4 limbs," remarked Trilana, her crystalline skin flickering with agitation. At the front of the lecture hall, Professor Xandu cleared his throat, the sound echoing from his trio of voice boxes. "Settle down, class. As you know, we have a new student joining us today. A human, from the death world known as Earth." A hush fell over the room. Deathworld. The word hung in the air, heavy with implications. The doors slid open with a hiss, and in strode a figure that looked like it had been chiseled from granite. Piercing green eyes surveyed the room from beneath an unruly shock of auburn hair. "Cadet Alexis Stahl reporting for duty," the human said, snapping off a crisp salute. Her voice was surprisingly melodic for a creature renowned for its brutality. Professor Xandu returned the salute with a flutter of his tentacles. "Welcome, Cadet Stahl. Please, take a seat." As Alexis strode confidently to an empty chair, the other students couldn't help but stare. Murmurs rippled through the classroom. "Look at those strange flat teeth. I thought humans had fur, like a Gorfulox." "Silence, please," Professor Xandu said, his voice resonating with authority. "Let us begin. Today, we will be discussing the strategic importance of supply lines in interstellar warfare." And so began the first of many lessons that would leave the students and faculty of the Galactic Academy utterly gobsmacked by the casual ferocity of their new human classmate. Shock and awful. And that is why, when executing a pincer movement, it is crucial to ensure your flanks are well guarded, Professor Xandu concluded, his tentacles tracing a diagram on the holoboard. "Any questions?" A green hand shot up from the back of the classroom. "Yes, Cadet Stahl." Alexis leaned forward, a glint in her eye. "What about a feint, Professor? You know, make it look like your forces are headed one way, then bam, you hit 'em where they least expect it." The professor's eye stalks swiveled to regard her. "An interesting notion, Cadet. But such a tactic would require a great deal of coordination and discipline to pull off." Alexis shrugged. "Nah, not really. You just need a good bluff. Like back on Earth, there was this thing called Operation Fortitude in World War I. The Allies made a whole fake army, with inflatable tanks and stuff, to fool the Germans into thinking the invasion of Europe would happen somewhere else. It totally worked." Stunned silence greeted this pronouncement. Professor Xandu blinked slowly, trying to process. "Inflatable tanks. Yeah, you know, decoys. Throw in some fake radio chatter, a few dummy camps. The enemy won't know what hit 'em till it's too late." Alexis mimed an explosion with her hands. Boom. Zorax raised a trembling claw. But is such deception not dishonorable?" Alexis fixed him with a stare. "Listen, Legs, when you're fighting for your species' survival against an enemy that wants to wipe you out, honor's got nothing to do with it. You do what you gotta do to win." The arachnoid quailed under her gaze, mandibles quivering. Professor Xandu cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Yes, well, an unorthodox perspective, to be sure. But perhaps we should move on to our next topic." As the lecture continued, Alexis leaned back in her chair with a satisfied smirk. The looks of horror and confusion on her classmates' faces were just too priceless. This was going to be fun. Mind games. The training simulation was not going well for Zorax's team. Their objective was simple: capture the flag from the center of the arena and return it to their base. But Alexis's team had them pinned down, peppering their position with laser fire every time they tried to advance. "We cannot get through," Trilana wailed. "They have us surrounded." Zorax peeked out from behind the boulder they were using for cover. Across the no-man's land of blasted rubble and smoldering craters, he could just make out the glint of Alexis's auburn hair. She had that look in her eye, the one that sent shivers down his spinnerets, the look that said, "I'm not just going to beat you, I'm going to break you." Suddenly, a blood-curdling screech echoed across the arena. Zorax nearly jumped out of his exoskeleton. What in the seven hells was Day 8? As if in answer, a figure came loping out of the smoke on all fours. But it wasn't one of Alexis's teammates. It was a monster. Its face was hideously distorted, all bulging eyes and slavering jaws. Wicked claws tipped its grasping fingers. A keening wail issued from its gaping maw as it bounded towards them with impossible speed. Trillana shrieked in terror. Zorax felt his hemolymph run cold. The monster was nearly upon them. They could see the crazed hunger in its eyes, smell the alien reek of its breath. And then, mere inches from Zorax's face, the creature stopped. It reached up with one taloned hand and peeled its face away. Alexis grinned at them from beneath the gory mask, emerald eyes dancing with mirth. "Surprise, suckers." She waggled the fake claws at them. "Pretty cool, huh? Amazing what you can do with a little latex and stage blood." Zorax gaped at her, mandibles slack with shock. You? I psyched you out, is what I did." Alexis tossed the mask away and unslung her laser rifle. "Oh, and while you lot were busy wetting yourselves," she jerked a thumb over her shoulder. Zorax looked past her to see Grix, Alexis's octopoid teammate, waving cheerfully at them from their base. A familiar blue pennant fluttered in one of his tentacles. The simulation dissolved around them, pixelated walls fading away to reveal the stark grid of the holoroom. Alexis's team had won. Again. As the two teams filed out, Professor Kuvor pulled Alexis aside. "Cadet, a word." She turned to face the towering insectoid, hands clasped behind her back. "What's up, Teach?" Kuvor's compound eyes glittered with concern. "Cadet Stahl, while I appreciate your enthusiasm, some of your methods are a bit—" He made a rattling noise that might have been a sigh. "Unorthodox." Alexis cocked an eyebrow. "You mean effective?" "I mean disturbing. These psychological tactics, this terror as you call it, I worry about the effect it may have on your fellow students." She met his gaze unflinchingly. In war, terror is a weapon like any other. And right now, those fellow students could stand to be a little more disturbed. It might just keep them alive someday. Kavor shifted uncomfortably on his 6 legs. "Even so, there are those who feel your methods are not in keeping with the spirit of the Galactic Accords. And when the next Hive fleet comes knocking, I'm sure the fine print will keep us all real safe." Alexis rolled her eyes. "You wanted a human's perspective, and now you've got it. It's not my fault if you can't handle the truth." She turned and strode away, leaving a very troubled Professor Kuvor to ponder the potential pitfalls of admitting a Deathworlder to the galaxy's most prestigious military academy. What had they gotten themselves into? Whispers of dissent. The human Deathworlder cadet, Alexis Stahl, has been attending the prestigious Galactic Academy for Strategic Studies for several months now. Her unorthodox approach to military strategy and casual ferocity in combat simulations has sent shockwaves through the formerly decorous halls of learning. Whispers swirl in the dormitory pods and commissary lines. Some admire her brazen tactical acumen, her visceral cunning. But many more are simply terrified of this fierce, green-eyed predator so casually inserting herself into their midst. "Did you hear what she did in the Zerog simulation last week?" Zorax asked, huddling with his Krish mates over nutrient paste. "I heard she vented the opposing team into space." Trillana whispered, crystalline skin pulsing with apprehension. "Without suits." "That can't be allowed, can it?" Another arachnoid hissed. "The Galactic Accords have strict rules about unnecessary loss of life in training." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the group. "I say we petition the Archons to have her removed," Trillana said, voice trembling but determined, "before she actually killed someone." The others looked around nervously, as if expecting the human to materialize from the shadows at any moment like some vengeful wraith. They all remembered the monster incident. Unbeknownst to the conspiring cadets, their furtive conversation was being monitored. High in the Academy's central spire, a conclave of professors and deans pored over the surveillance footage with mounting concern. "This unrest cannot be allowed to continue," Professor Xandu said gravely, his eye stalks drooping. "Cadet Stahl's presence is disruptive to the learning environment." Dean Xylos nodded his craggy head. "Agreed. But to expel her now, without clear cause, would be seen as discriminatory. The Terran ambassador would have our hides. Then there must be a reckoning." Professor Kvor chittered, compound eyes glittering. "Bring the human before the council. Let her answer for her methods directly." "Now wait just a moment," a voice rang out. The assembled faculty turned to see Professor Vandross rising from his hover chair. Auditory fins flared with agitation. "Are we really considering punishing a student for excelling in her studies? For pushing the boundaries of convention?" The ichthyoid academic burbled. "Is that not the very purpose of our institution?" "Boundaries are one thing," Professor Xantu countered. "Psychological trauma is quite another. Maybe it is us who need to adapt." Vandross shot back, gills pulsing. "The galaxy is a harsh and violent place. If we coddle our cadets, how can they hope to?" The debate raged back and forth, growing more heated by the moment. And all the while, Alexis Stahl went about her studies, blissfully unaware of the furor her presence had unleashed. She had more important things to worry about, like the advanced xenocidal warfare exam next week. She grinned to herself, already envisioning the looks on her classmates' faces when she unveiled her next unorthodox strategy. This was shaping up to be a very interesting semester indeed. No such thing as a perfect soldier. Professor Zaloth's lecture on the ethics of interstellar warfare droned on, his monochromatic voice dripping with condescension. "And that, cadets, is why the Galactic Accords strictly prohibit the use of relativistic kill vehicles. The potential for collateral damage is simply too. With all due respect, sir," a clear voice cut through the auditorium like a plasma blade. "I think that's a load of stardust." All eyes swiveled to the source of the interruption. One cadet, Alexis Stahl, leaning back in her chair with an air of nonchalant defiance. Professor Zaloth's exoskeleton rippled with agitation. "I beg your pardon, cadet." Alexis shrugged, her human face inscrutable. "I'm just saying, in a real war, against a real enemy, you use whatever weapons you've got. If that means chucking an asteroid at a planet or two, then that's what you do." Shocked whispers raced through the assembled cadets like an electrical current. To speak so cavalierly of planetary devastation, it was unthinkable. "Cadet Stahl," Professor Zaloth hissed, his mandibles quivering with barely contained outrage. "The Accords exist for a reason, to prevent the kind of wanton destruction that led to the dark times, the times of fire." "Yeah, I read the history docs," Alexis interrupted again, examining her fingernails with an air of supreme boredom. "And you know what I learned? In war, the side that's willing to do what the other side won't is the side that wins." Xyloth slammed a chitinous fist down on his lectern, making the holographic display flicker. This is precisely the kind of thinking the Accords were designed to prevent. The belief that victory justifies any act, no matter how heinous. Alexis leaned forward, green eyes glinting in the harsh light of the auditorium. "Let me ask you something, Professor. You ever had to fight for your species' survival? You ever had to make the choice between watching your homeworld burn and pressing that big red button?" The insectoid lecturer recoiled as if slapped, his compound eyes widening. "I didn't think so," Alexis said softly, her voice laden with a weariness far beyond her years. "It's easy to preach peace and restraint from an ivory tower, but out there, in the real world, when the enemy's at the gates and it's down to you or them, there's no such thing as a perfect soldier, just one who's still breathing when the guns fall silent." The lecture hall was silent, every soul transfixed by the human's words. For a long moment, no one moved, scarcely dared to breathe. Then, with a soft rustle of fabric, Alexis stood. If that's all, Professor, I have a sharpshooting exam to study for. She walked out, the cadets parting before her like a shoal before a shark. No one spoke. What could they say in the face of such raw, unflinching truth? Professor Zyloff looked out over the stunned faces of his students and knew, with a sinking certainty, that his world had just tilted on its axis. The question was, in which direction? A plea for help. The summons came at dawn, delivered by a stone-faced Praetorian in full ceremonial armor. Cadet Stahl, your presence is requested in the assembly hall. Immediately, Alexis rubbed the sleep from her eyes, a dozen worst-case scenarios flashing through her mind. Had someone finally snapped and attacked her in a fit of xeno-outrage? Or had her habit of accidentally leaving scare gas grenades in the communal bathrooms pushed them over the edge? She threw on her uniform and followed the guard through the vaulted halls of the academy, their footsteps echoing in the eerie pre-dawn stillness. When they arrived at the assembly hall, Alexis was surprised to find it packed to the rafters with cadets, instructors, and administrators. The air fairly crackled with tension. At the center of the hall, on a raised dais, stood the academy's most senior staff. Alexis recognized Archmago Zor, the Grandmaster of the Academy, his wizened features projecting an air of profound solemnity. "Cadet Alexis Stahl," he intoned, his voice amplified to fill the cavernous space. "Step forward." Alexis complied, spine straight and head held high. She would not cower, not even in the face of whatever kangaroo court awaited her. She was a human, a child of Earth, and she would face her accusers with unwavering defiance. But the Archmago's next words took her by surprise. "We have called you here, Cadet Stahl, because we need your help." A confused murmur rippled through the assembled crowd. Alexis blinked, momentarily taken aback. "My help?" Archmago Zor nodded gravely. "We have received word of a grave threat to the stability of the Galactic Federation. A warlord has arisen in the outer reaches, one who employs savage and unconventional tactics. Already, 3 systems have fallen under his sway." The Archmagos paused, as if steeling himself for his next words. "His name is Karzak, and he is human." Shocked gasps echoed through the hall. Alexis felt a chill run down her spine. A human warlord. Out here, in the depths of space, it seemed impossible. "Our conventional strategies have proved ineffective against Karzak's forces," the Archmagos continued heavily. "Which is why we turn to you, Cadet Stahl. As distasteful as your methods may seem to us, it is becoming increasingly clear that they may be our only hope of stopping this menace." Alexis's mind raced. A chance to put her skills to the test, to show these soft-shelled ETs what a real soldier could do. But something nagged at her, a flicker of doubt. "Why me?" she asked, voice echoing in the sudden silence. "Surely you have more experienced warriors, leaders with actual combat experience." The Archmagos smiled sadly. "In all the long centuries of the Federation, not one among us has faced the kind of total war that your species seems to have perfected. The pitiless calculus of survival, the dreadful algebra of extinction, these are foreign concepts to us. But to you." He spread his hands in a gesture of supplication. "We need the mind of a Deathworlder, Cadet Stahl. We need you." Alexis looked out over the sea of alien faces, at the mixture of hope and fear, revulsion and respect, and felt the weight of destiny settling on her shoulders. She took a deep breath, tasting the recycled air, and made her decision. "Tell me everything you know about this Karzak," she said, her voice hardening into the tempered steel of a soldier's resolve. "And then let's talk about how we're going to take him down." The Archmagos bowed his head in gratitude and relief, and as he began to lay out the details of the threat they faced, Alexis couldn't help but feel a thrill of anticipation mingled with the grim focus of a warrior preparing for battle. It seemed her unorthodox education was about to get a very real, very deadly final exam, and failure was not an option. The Reckoning. The bridge of the Galactic Federation strike cruiser Indomitable Will thrummed with tension as it dropped out of warp on the edge of the Zeta Reticuli system. On the view screen, the lush green world of Haldor Prime swelled into view, its verdant continents marred by the ugly scars of orbital bombardment. At the heart of the bridge, Alexis Stahl stood in the commander's circle, her hands clasped behind her back in a posture of calm readiness. Around her, the ship's crew went about their duties with a focused intensity, their multi-hued faces bathed in the glow of holographic displays. "Admiral on deck," a voice barked, and Alexis turned to see Archmago Zor himself striding onto the bridge, resplendent in his ceremonial battle armor. The old alien's face was grave as he took his place beside her. "He's here," the Archmagos said without preamble. "Karzak's flagship has been detected in low orbit over the capital. The rest of his fleet is arrayed around the planet." Alexis nodded, her eyes never leaving the tactical display. "Just as we anticipated. He's overconfident, thinks his terror tactics have broken the locals' will to resist." "He may not be wrong," Zor cautioned. "The planetary defense forces are in disarray, and our own fleet is still hours away. It falls to us to hold the line." Alexis allowed herself a small, cold smile. "Then it's a good thing you brought along your secret weapon, isn't it?" She turned to face the bridge crew, her voice ringing out with the clarity of a war horn. "All hands, battle stations. Prep boarding pods and ready the EMP torpedoes. We're going in." The crew leaped to obey, a flurry of activity erupting across the bridge. Alexis felt the old, familiar thrill of adrenaline surging through her veins, the icy focus of a predator on the hunt. "Cadet Stahl," the Archmagos said softly, drawing her attention. "Alexis, you understand what is at stake here. The fate of billions rests on the outcome of this battle. If we fail—" "We won't," Alexis said, her voice diamond-hard with certainty. "I didn't come all this way just to let some power-mad warmonger with delusions of godhood run roughshod over the galaxy. One way or another, Karzak's reign ends today." The old alien held her gaze for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Then may the stars guide your hand, Deathworlder. For all our sakes." The Indomitable Will surged forward, her engines flaring blue as she dove towards the beleaguered planet. Alexis watched the hostile fleet grow larger on the view screen, a predatory grin spreading across her face. She thought of all the long months of training, of the whispers and fearful glances, the accusations of barbarism and brutality. She thought of the look in Zor's eyes when he had begged for her aid, the desperation of a being who had never known true fear. They had called her a monster, a savage, a creature of nightmare. And now, with civilization itself on the brink, they turned to her to save them. It was time to show them what a real monster could do. "Weapons free," she ordered, her voice a low, vengeful growl. "Let's go be heroes." And with a silent prayer to whatever gods might be listening, Alexis Stahl led her ship and her crew into the maelstrom of war, determined to forge a legend that would echo through the ages. One way or another, the galaxy would never be the same. The end.